Okay, good morning once again. At this time, I'd like for us to all please stand for the St. Martin song.
Find an island there, so lovely small, with nations free, with people French and Dutch, though talking English much, as the St. Martin in the sea. Oh, sweet St. Martin's land, so bright by beach and strand, with sailors on the sea and harbors free, where the chains of mountains green variously in sunlight sheen. Oh, I love thy paradise, nature's beauty fairly nice. Oh, I love thy paradise, nature's beauty fairly nice.
Thank you. Please be seated. I want to welcome you to day 2 of the National Development Vision's presentations panel discussion. Our theme for today is a strong and resilient economy. And at this time, I'd like to welcome to present us with the opening remarks and outline theme 2, the Secretary General of the Ministry of General Affairs. Please help me welcome Mrs. Emilia Connor Thomas.
Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Sylvia Jacobs, honorable members of the Council of Ministers, honorable members of Parliament, Secretaries General, distinguished presenters and panelists, Madam Moderator, Chairman of the Day, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the launch of the National Development Vision. Today, we will delve into development theme number 2, a strong and resilient economy. The National Development Vision envisions a strong and resilient economy only when St. Martin economy rewards opportunities, only when our economy is open for business, and only when our economy supports sustainable and resilient development. These attributes I just mentioned are further broken down into 7 visionary goals. As such, the first half of this morning's session, you will be presented with a series of keynote presentations to highlight the sub-themes within the National Development Vision. During the second half of the morning, you will be informed about the initiatives of government that are currently ongoing to achieve the goals of the National Development Vision. The vision also acknowledges and highlights the importance and uniqueness of St. Martin's geographical location. We are cognizant that there are many challenges ahead of us as a result of the events such as Hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, followed by the COVID pandemic in 2019 and onwards, and other external shocks. Nevertheless, St. Martin's future development depends greatly on promoting St. Martin as a safe and attractive market for investment, coupled with our strategic location as a regional hub for the Northeastern Caribbean. I am certain, without a doubt, that we can all agree that having a broad-based vision that guides all of our efforts and energy in the same direction will ensure intentional progress. So let's be intentional with our discussions today. And with this, I bid you a great and productive session this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the Secretary General of the Ministry of General Affairs, Mrs. Emilia Connor Thomas. We'll now get into the presentations for this morning, beginning with our keynote address. And the keynote address will be delivered by the Director of the Central Bank, St. Maarten. Ms. Raquel Lofo-Wong, Director of the Central Bank, St. Maarten. Prior to her appointment as Branch Director of the St. Maarten office of the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Maarten, she gained valuable experience in the banking and insurance industry, which is beneficial to the implementation of the strategic objectives of the Central Bank of Curaçao and St. Maarten. She enjoys over 20 years of experience in risk assessment in both mature and emerging markets. These include 15 years as corporate lender in the markets Curaçao, Aruba, and St. Maarten, and 6 years as underwriter in the Netherlands, conducting risk assessment and mitigating coverage of and extension of credit. She maintained close relationships with key clients, underwriting capital providers, and other stakeholders. Ms. Lofo-Wong also focused on understanding market needs in order to leverage client demand within policy constraints. Please help me welcome the Central Bank Director, St. Maarten, Ms. Raquel Lofo-Wong.
Good morning, everyone. Just get myself organized. Can I get some help with getting the presentation up, please? Thank you. Before I even, and then the remote. This one? Okay. Now it should be good. To use this? It takes a little pause. Okay, okay. Good morning once again. With protocol having been established, please allow me to commend the government of St. Maarten and all those who participated in the creation and launch of the National Development Vision 2020-2030 for St. Maarten. The CBCS welcomes the holistic approach, you hear me, and for the governance of the country. And we will play our part to make sure that this vision comes to life. This document is a collective vision that attempts to capture and reflect all of our aspirations, hopes, and dreams, and it's no small task. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. If you look at the contents of today's presentation, we will start with a, let me do it like this, with a characteristic of the St. Maarten economy. We provide a brief overview of the macroeconomic developments today, highlight recent developments in the public finance, and then we will conclude with an outline of the CBCS policy's recommendation geared towards today's theme of building a strong and resilient economy. Before we start and before we get to the end point and tell you what our policy recommendations are, it would be good to get an understanding of St. Maarten and where we are now. Like many of the small Caribbean islands, St. Maarten's development is constrained by a lack of natural resources, and it's small. It also has a small, open, and undiversified economy, driven mainly by the revenues earned from the tourism sector. And we have a high dependency of import. Because of this, we are vulnerable to external shocks, especially natural disasters like hurricanes and economic or financial crises that occur elsewhere, but nonetheless impact the travel regions that we depend upon. Nevertheless, and thankfully, maybe, St. Maarten has one of the highest GDP per capita in the region. If you look at St. Maarten's economy and where we earn our foreign reserves from, you could see that the largest driver is the tourism sector. St. Maarten is 62.5% generating its foreign exchange revenue from the tourism sector. This shows that we are, as an economy, very not diversified. Coming back to the GDP per capita of St. Maarten, you could see that if you look at average GDP between 2010 and 2019 for the Caribbean islands, we are one of the highest. You can see St. Maarten there, you could see the Bahamas, you could see Aruba. We are about a little bit more than $30,000 per person. The only thing, what does it really say? It says that yes, GDP per capita is high, but it doesn't say nothing about the distribution of income in the residents of the country. Although there's not a lot of data available to calculate it, we were able to go back to the 2018 labor survey, and those numbers shows that 68% of the households have an income of less than 50,000 guilders. 9% of those households earn more than 125,000 guilders per household. So what does that show? It shows that the income as it is not shared equally among the country's inhabitants. Looking at 2010, some macroeconomic developments, the growth has been lackluster. We have back-to-back shocks in 2017 and 2020. And also when you look at the GDP growth rates, if you exclude those rebounds that happened after Hurricane Irma and COVID, the annual growth rates are extremely low, averaging about 0.9% between 2010 and 2016. There are several reasons for this. Unfortunately, one of the reasons has been the political instability, which has led to a lot of political focus and also uncertainty in the investment outlook. Nevertheless, on the positive side, even though we have this happening, and we all not diversified, and we are vulnerable to external shocks, you see that we were able to rebound very fast after Hurricane Irma, Maria, and the COVID pandemic, and we can attribute that mainly to our strong tourism sector and the US market that serves us. On a positive note, the tourism levels are recovering, but they're still below pre-Irma levels. We're getting there, but we're not where we want to be yet. One of the reasons, therefore, is that the lack of progress in the reconstruction of the airport is hampering us because they're not at pre-Irma levels and pre-COVID levels yet. Another factor can also be that our hotel inventory is not up to date. We're still missing a lot of rooms that were destroyed after Hurricane Irma and Maria. But positively is again, our US market, as I said before, if you're looking at year 2019 and 2022, we're almost there. So our US market is really pushing and helping us in the recovery of the economy. The cruise sector, however, they're struggling. Wait, wrong sector. Cruise is still struggling. This sheet shows us that we had some good years. There was a good rebound after Hurricane Irma, the years 2018, 2019, and then the pandemic hit. The pandemic hit hard because of CDC's no sales orders. Alex, is that you? CDC no sales orders in 2020, and also the perception that there is that what that means, what happens when there's a COVID outbreak on a ship. I understand, and we were all hoping that the cruise industry would recover faster than it is. However, expectations are that it's going to take a little bit longer than expected. Public finances, still a concern. The shocks that we've had in the years 2017 have really drained the budget and have put a strain on your budget. If you're looking at the effect of the hurricane and the pandemic on the budget balance, you could see that the government balance in 2022 is expected to end at -3% of GDP, which is an improvement coming back from pre-COVID, which stood at almost -9% of GDP. Public investments also is low. Public investments averaging between 2011 and 2021, share of public investment in GDP is about 0.8% of GDP. But we are still positive that public investment could have a positive impact on the economic growth, particularly in difficult times. Also in the longer term, the effect of public investment of the growth of an economy, it's bigger than public investment or consumption. Debt to GDP, no surprise there. We started with a relatively clean slate in 2010 at 25.5% of a debt to GDP ratio. This has increased and then exponentially increased in the last years. We expect to end the year at 51% of GDP. And of course, this has a lot to do with the COVID pandemic, which put a lot of strain on our macroeconomic and social impact. And the government had no alternative to reach out to the Netherlands for funding. So hence why we are now at where we expect to end at about 51% debt to GDP ratio, which of course is a large burden for the government to repay. So where are we going? What do we think we should do to get where we want to be, which is a stronger and more resilient economy? Our vision is that we have to diversify the tourism market. We are dependent of over 50% of our revenue of our tourist sector from the US market. As a result, we are also very dependent on economic shocks and other shocks that happen in that market. We could expand our product to more niche markets and also focus on interest groups that are generate a more value add than traditional tourism does. One of the things too, which we think could have a positive impact on the economy of St. Maarten, is that we focus more on participation of local businesses in the tourism-related activities. The weakness in the labor markets, what we think here is that you have to make the labor markets more flexible through reforms. That could be to allow seasonal workers and to allow multiple jobs as well. I think we all acknowledge that there is a skill mismatch in the labor markets, and we could do that with retraining. We could improve education and vocational training programs, and measures like these could help with reducing the high unemployment rate that there currently is on the island. Let's see if I have it. Go. Another thing, and I'm going into here some of the research that the central bank did on financial education and literacy. We did a study last year together with the STAT on financial education and financial literacy, and we did it about, we interviewed about 1,400 households, and the findings in that is that financial literacy, we need to do some work there, financial education as well, financial inclusion for sure. 19%, or, sorry, let me go back. 17% of the respondents that showed that they do not have a bank account. That means that there are 70% of the respondents, and the survey was representative for the population. If you draw it further, 70% of the population do not partake part in the financial system. Also, cash is still king. We all, a lot of people, still hold a lot of cash on hand for payments, and for purchases. Also, we asked some questions on, basic questions on understanding, if people have an understanding of financial knowledge, and that showed that there's some work to do there. So this work will have to be done with the central bank, it has to be done with government, it has to be done with the financial sector, it has to be done with other stakeholders, the Chamber of Commerce, the SHTA. We all have some work to do there. And it's not only for the consumer, but it's also for the merchant, having them understand how they can participate in a broader inclusion of the population in St. Maarten in the financial sector. Also, we looked at we did a study, a red state study, into looking at our business climate. The results there show that sorry, let me go back. We need to do some work there. The study will come out shortly. And we hope that the findings of this research will be the basis for constructive dialogue among stakeholders and policymakers in order to improve the investment climate in St. Maarten, as we need to focus more on policy continuity. We should strengthen fiscal resilience. We should have a medium-term fiscal consolidation path. We started already with reforms on the healthcare and the pension system to reduce the pressure on the government budget. We should look at public financial management to make sure that resources are resourced or are placed more efficient and allocated more effective. If you look at the revenue side, tax compliance should be improved, and it's not only getting the people to pay, but also making sure that we widen the tax base and to distribute the tax burden more evenly. We have capacity constraints here, so this is not something that we can do in 1 year. That's why our focus is, our suggestion is to do this over a 4-year time frame. The program that we propose should be based on prudent assumptions regarding economic growth and fiscal targets, and include clear medium-term priorities. And also, our suggestion is to not look at a balanced budget rule, but look at a debt anchor instead, because in terms of difficult times that we're having, the balanced budget rule will not help us if you look into public investment that is needed. Coming back to public investments, it has been low. I said it before. That is one of the main opportunities that we recommend. But if you do that, we do that with clear priorities and investment projects that provide high economic and social return, and also include norms that guarantee that the quality is guaranteed, and to efficiently resource the allocation of the funds available. One thing that I forgot to mention, and that is for all of us here. I think we've all heard us before. If we want to get policy written, we need to understand what is going on in the economy. So we need to have data. We need to have timeliness and accuracy of essential statistics to inform policy-making investment in quality. Statistic gathering should be a priority for any government. So if possible, allocate some funds to getting that improved. And finally, in closing, in Dutch, some of you speak Dutch, some of you don't, but voorkomen is beter dan genezen. So let's make sure that whatever policy we put out there, whatever measures we take, that we take into account that we live in a hurricane belt, and we have to be aware of the risk this imposes. So we need to make sure that any measures we take are precautionary and not after the fact. So what we can do here is that we need to make sure that the measures are there, but also how do we respond to these hurricane or other climate-imposed actions. One of the things we recommend, you could work on hurricane-resisting building standards, maintaining key infrastructure, and also developing a crisis recovery framework. This is something we also do at the central bank. We're looking at the potential macroeconomic implications, sorry, of climate change, and we're going to do some research in this next year. Also, as an entity, we're looking at reducing our carbon footprint. So I know some of you might have seen the Curacao office. It's very highly run on solar, something that we're looking into here as well. So I mean, every entity, be it government, I see some other stakeholders here, see what you can do to reduce your carbon footprint. And in closing, you know, I hope that together, and taking some of the recommendations that we have given today, that we can work together to collectively build a stronger and more resilient economy in Sint Maarten. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the Director of the Central Bank, St. Maarten, Raquel Lofo-Wang. Let's give her another round of applause. And I noticed quite a few folks taking pictures of the slides. All of the presentations will be provided to you at the end of the day. I was told to make sure, let you know that. So focus on the information that's being delivered, and you don't need to be doing a lot of writing and taking pictures. We have two vehicles that need to be moved. P9260, a blue Honda, and M13133, a black vehicle. You don't have to leave the building, just give the key to Fabiana. She drives all kinds of vehicles, and she would ensure that your vehicle is put in a safe place. So one more time, that's P9260, a blue Honda, and M13133. Okay, good. So we want to thank the Director of the Central Bank for those recommendations, for giving us the big picture and, of course, the recommendations as well. Being more proactive and less reactive, I think that's one of the things that I'll take away from that presentation. There are, of course, lots of opportunities that were pointed out, and along with the opportunities comes the rewards if we can take advantage of those opportunities. Our next presenter is going to explain to us exactly what are the economic rewards and opportunities that we can take advantage of. Our second presenter this morning is Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉 is an internationally recognized business expert, and her work in entrepreneurship development is focused on equipping island-based entrepreneurs to build sustainable and thriving businesses while showcasing the innovation of the islands to the world. 𝒂𝒄 has designed and hosted several programs to stimulate entrepreneurship and has consulted with Red Cross and Micromentor. Through Islandpreneur, 𝒂𝒄 and her team has hosted several events and projects that bring together local and international experts, thought leaders, and stakeholders to build capacity amongst entrepreneurs of all stages and to address unique challenges facing islandpreneurs. Some global leaders include Jeff Hoffman, co-founder of Priceline.com, and Evan Carmichael, venture capitalist turned YouTuber with more than 3 million subscribers. This morning she's here to outline to us some of the opportunities and rewards within our economy. Please help me welcome Ms. 𝒂𝒄 Badijo.
Good morning, everyone. Protocol having been established. There we go, I think so. Protocol having been established, I'd like to also thank, I'm not sure where if I can get some assistance, thank you. Protocol being established, I'd like to also thank the organizers for this extraordinary opportunity. And as we're working out some of the technical aspects, no, this isn't, excuse me, sorry. This isn't it. It still has CBS. I'm not sure I've emailed it. Yep. Yep. Now I hope this doesn't impede my 10 minutes, eh? I hope this isn't part of my 10 minutes. I was given strict instructions. So let's do that over again. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I want to congratulate the organizers of this for such an amazing event, and I appreciate being chosen to share my perspective on this. It is a true honor. I also would like to thank Ms. Lofa Wong from the Central Bank. It's almost as if we exchanged notes, but we didn't. And so I'm going to share this in the way that I see the world. And when asked to share this morning, there was an emphasis on sharing what strong and resilient looks like, but also emphasizing goal 10 about a capable workforce and motivated workforce, as well as goal 11 of SME, small, medium enterprises, being the driving engine of St. Maarten. So if you would allow me, I'd like to cast a vision, because I couldn't figure out how to do it any other way, right? And of course, this is a national development vision. So it's November 9th, 2 days before St. Martin's Day, like today. But it's now 2030. We're all excited. Most of us are right back in this room having the discussion about what happened over the past 7 to 8 years. We're grateful for this opportunity. We're all buzzing. And you hear things like, we did it. I can't believe it. It's done. So what did we do? We showed the world that not only are we strong and resilient, but we're stronger and more resilient than ever before. We showed the world that though tourism is still a strong component of our economic pillar, we see things like exports, because our entrepreneurs are now exporting to the world, having, instead of a Goya brand, it's a 7-to-1 brand that's being shipped to South America, to all over. We see our talents going into realms of the planet that we could only have guessed, and that the monies and the resources are coming back. We see investors hunting our small, medium enterprises down because they know it's a good investment and they're guaranteed a return on it. That's what I see in 2030. That's what it looks like for me. And so That also includes things like education and being a safe and attractive place where you know as an individual you can have forward and upward economic, social, and occupational mobility. It looks like heavy investments in our human capital. It looks like education. So in order for this stronger and more resilient, remember it's November 9th, 2030, 2 days before St. Martin's Day. And so in order to look and have a really clear view on that, we look at how do we do rewards and opportunities. These are just, they may look like just pictures, but instead of words, pictures speak 1,000 words. And so we have people who now are able to take care of their families because they have attained the kind of education, training, skills that allows them not only to work in St. Martin, but on St. Martin. That companies around the world are looking for their skill set, and due to the increase of remote work, which in 2035 will consist of about 45% of the planet's population, then big companies are looking for our technicals on St. Martin. It looks like people getting educated not just on things that our forefathers wanted to do, you know, the traditional doctor, engineer, lawyer, right? But things like being an entrepreneur, technical skills, science, engineering, mathematics, arts, sports, culture. Those things matter too. It looks like 21st century skills where critical thinking and creativity and collaboration are a must. It looks like our kids, and since we have there we go. Our kids, who right now, these are secondary schools in the National Youth Pitch competition that is now ongoing, are discovering ways to build a future for themselves and not just find work. It looks like our diaspora, Leslie Samuel, who is based in Florida, speaks in Australia, and born and raised right here on St. Martin, who comes here every year to find a way to contribute to our economy in different ways that he can. It looks like us having fun, some good old drinks, but not just that we're having fun and having good old drinks, but that we're creating the kinds of drinks that everybody else wants and they're paying us for it. It looks like us being producers and not just consumers of a good time. And then it also looks at like us daring to dream and being able to make that a reality. I don't know what happened here. I got so excited. So, what does that look like? It looks like we've attained the two main goals that we set out to do for a country that rewards opportunities and rewards opportunities for us. Those two goals being having a capable and motivated workforce, where education is accessible, where we're seeing innovation in different regards, investment from all over the world, as well as local investment. We can't count our local investors out. In also economic diversification and competitiveness. And like my dad would like to tell me all the time, Ify, the only person you're in competition is with yourself. So to focus on being better every single day, and social and occupational mobility. It looks like basic education includes, like I said, STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, math. It includes financial literacy and entrepreneurship education, not just as a foundation for employability to find work, but to create work. It looks like a culture of lifelong learning where instead of saying, girl, you see what she got on? We could say, girl, you see what certificate she got? It looks like that, where we maintain skills and our competences, because the one thing that is constant is change. That is evidenced by the increase in natural disasters, geopolitical dynamics globally, supply chain challenges, as well as economic downturns that we are currently in and is expected to increase in 2023 with a global recession. It looks like investment in comprehensive development focused not just on education, but quality of life. And that includes sports and arts, and also is inclusive in nature so that whether you are impaired physically, mentally, or otherwise, you are still able to progress in this life and on St. Maarten. And for the SMEs, one of my favorite topics. Small, medium enterprises are not just currently the engine of growth on St. Maarten, accounting for 89% of our economy, but they remain strong and they attract international, regional, and local investment. It is now 2030, November 9th, 2 days before St. Maarten's Day. Instead of $35 million still being able to fill that pot, we are now 5 years beyond the date that the enterprise support program has ended, and we're seeing clear return on investments because the technology that exists, the education that exists, and the growth in our SMEs are thriving. We, instead of just seeing 1,313 new loan requests since 2017 by credits alone, we're seeing that our banking infrastructure does not limit our SME progress, but it propels it. We see that there's a thriving ecosystem with an enabling regulatory framework that also encompasses and focuses not on tax breaks only for big business, but also on tax rebates and tax incentives for small, medium enterprises. We see also that there's a lowered cost of doing business so that we don't have to suffer while doing business. We see also programs being multiplied and proliferated, which is happening right now. I saw Anne here, she has different programs, Islandpreneur has programs and they're ongoing. But that boosts confidence and trust so that when people think of islandpreneurs, as I like to call them, on St. Maarten, they think of a good investment. We see those programs being embedded in things like incubator systems and accelerators, and that we're connecting to the incubators and accelerators of the world to ensure that we have growth and mobility. We see a national agency, according to the National Development Vision, an SME authority that is tasked to ensure that these things are a reality, to monitor it, and to address every related challenge. We also see an increase in development of young entrepreneurs who, by the way, are fantastic. These kids are brilliant. You're looking at apps, you're looking at upcycle businesses, you're looking at food businesses, and they're daring to dream big. And so we see an increase in that. That is not only to say, oh, you can be an entrepreneur, but for them to develop the transferable skills of math, leadership, communication, administration, accounting, that will help them to propel no matter what if they decide to become an entrepreneur as a lifelong career or not. In short, we see an economy that is stronger and more resilient than ever before. A one where there are equitable opportunities for everyone to learn and to develop into the productive citizen that they see themselves in. Where St. Maarten becomes a bit of a utopia, and I dare say a utopia because I believe it's possible, so that all of us are contributing to the economy, and that all of us are able to live here comfortably and not have to wonder, should I leave or should I stay? Because I love St. Maarten, but I can't afford to be here. We see an economy where there's an opportunity to build growing businesses and as a regional hub, not only become a location for products and services to transship through, but that we are building global brands and businesses of which we are able to export and thus impact GDP significantly. Also an opportunity to build a growing business so that we could provide jobs, so that we could provide opportunities for others to grow, so that we could see every district in St. Maarten as a place to live and not have to wonder, can I live in 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉 because I don't know if I could do business in 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉, is it safe? Because the guy in the street now has a job in a place where he's earning a decent living wage. We see that, at least I see that, in November 9th, 2030, 2 days before St. Maarten's Day. Thank you.
thank you very much for that presentation. And I was asked to let you know that when you came in, you would have received a USB. And the National Development Vision, the entire document, is on that USB for those of you who have not realized that as yet. So we want to thank 𝒐𝒊 for her presentation. 𝒐𝒊, thank you very much. Critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, those are all the things that are needed to propel us into the future. And of course, the National Development Vision fits right into that as well. Our third presenter is coming to tell you that St. Maarten is open for business and to invest long term. She is the president of the board of the St. Maarten Chamber of Commerce, and that is Jennifer Carty. Jennifer Carty is the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She's also a local business owner of Altus Branding Agency. Jennifer is a brand designer and works with an international portfolio of clientele. She holds a master's degree in communication science, and aside from her work, she is also an animal activist and loves traveling. Here to tell us that St. Maarten is open for business, please welcome Jennifer Carty.
All right, good morning, everyone. Protocol has already been established, and I'm here to tell you that St. Maarten is open for business. So this presentation that I've prepared, I've been told to keep it very short, so I will give you the short and sweet version of the two goals that I have been chosen to present regarding St. Maarten investment. And it's quite interesting that this presentation now comes after the keynote that we had this morning and the beautiful vision that was outlined by Ms. Badajo, because with all of that, and of course with what Ms. Raquel in her earlier presentation mentioned, the need for reform and reform of policies, that is, and the beautiful vision that was just illustrated by Ms. Badajo, in able to achieve that, we do need policies in place that are going to help us achieve those goals, and that's exactly what I'm going to segue into this morning. So St. Maarten's economy is open for business and invests long term. And the National Development Vision illustrates these two goals, right? Goal 12 is an efficient, enabling regulatory framework for local businesses, which is linked to a transparent, broad, and policy environment for investment. And then, of course, goal 13, which is we're talking in obviously present tense, there are expanded sectors with competitive advantages, right? So let's dive a little bit deeper into goal 12 and what that can mean. So obviously new policy is obtained through political will, right? The will politically to make these changes in order for us to obtain our goals. And then obviously we develop a whole new regulatory reform. Now what is a regulatory reform? Just for those that may be a bit uncertain, it is actually refers to the changes to improve the regulatory quality, to enhance economic performance, cost effectiveness, or legal quality. So improving the quality of the existing laws or obviously new laws. And these regulations are related to government formalities. This can be a single change or an improvement of existing policies or of a complete overhaul of the entire policy regimen, right? And why is this so important? Obviously to obtain our goal, to obtain the vision that was so beautifully illustrated this morning. But it reduces, especially where investment is concerned, it reduces the barriers to competition and market openness, and it fosters market dynamics while ensuring essential social and environmental welfare, right? So these are the three main key important drivers of why we will do regulatory reform. Aside from that, by having these policies in place in a very transparent manner, it also combats corruption, which is obviously also a very important goal for any country. So I took a page out of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. There are about 40 countries that are taking part of this program, and this is a program that was developed in the mid-1990s. Obviously, because we had to make, countries had to make certain adjustments and shifts to deal with globalization, right? Which is something now that obviously if we're welcoming investments, we also need to be able to make these shifts in order to benefit from globalization. And you take a look at their program, they have these three perspectives. Obviously, there's regulatory policy, there's competition policy, and market openness policy. And I'm just gonna run through them really quickly because I only have 10 minutes, but just to give you an idea. So now, regulatory policy can be anything. There can be so many policies. It could even be, for instance, the goal of reducing the country's carbon footprint, right, to become a more sustainable country. But the National Development Vision Plan outlines digital governance, and it's also one of my favorite topics of the year. And it's also something that I'm lucky enough to see to kind of be in its infancy stages to come to fruition through the NRPV, through the Trust Fund, which is the Digital Government Transformation Program. And I think it's just a beautiful example to illustrate how with the use of policy, proper policy, we can, you know, obviously reduce all of the administrative burdens, and obviously, you know, that might deter investment. So with digital governance, for instance, there's a number of key things that have to be set forth in policy, but then these would be the benefits of digital governance. Obviously being digital by design, leveraging IT to be able to build an infrastructure that's going to benefit not only, you know, the public, but also foreigners willing to invest into the country. Being data-driven, as mentioned in the previous presentations, data is extremely crucial to be able to do proper planning as a country. And with having everything in a digital platform, we're able to compute real-time data that will assist us in making certain decisions and having those streamlined with our policies. Acting as a platform, as one platform, is most important, and this was also described in the vision plan, is instead of functioning in, as government functions now in kind of silos with different departments, and also like for instance the Chamber of Commerce, which is an indirect government organization, we kind of have now a lot of administrative burden. We lose time, we lose money, and that is also a deterrent for investments. So by having one platform which is basically interoperable, we now can reduce those kind of administrative burdens, which obviously cost everyone money. Open by default means obviously the transparency. So policies, laws, everything will be accessed, open for the public. So there's a lot of transparency in how things are done. There's no more, you know, that there's one decision maker that gets to make all of the decisions, and the process on how that happened or occurred is not exactly clear. That will now no longer be the case, which will obviously have a much more transparent playing field for investors, local businesses, and everyone involved. User-driven, obviously we're using technology, we have data, so now we can create an experience that is beneficial to the end user. And proactive, so we can make changes on the fly because we have that data to be able to meet the needs of our investors or our regular citizens here on St. Martin. So this is an example of, you know, understanding why this is important, transforming it into a policy, and then having the political will to pass these policies to ensure that, you know, this is something that we're following that will improve investment both locally and foreign investment. Now, competition policy, you know, this is an important one because we often see things like where we have, where we do not allow enough competition, but competition for economic purposes is extremely healthy, right? It allows markets to invest efficiency, innovation, and growth, and ensuring that competition is not restricted or undermined is something that should be contained in a policy. And there's certain questions that you have to ask yourself when developing such a policy. For instance, to what extent is the role or enforcement decision makers transparent? So what does this decision-making process look like to ensure that there is healthy competition? And to what extent does this competition law apply broadly to all activities in the economy? So including both goods and services, as well as both public and private activities. Then I have market openness. And market openness basically this allows digitalization to flourish, right? So we're not looking at borders, but we're looking at a plethora of businesses that can do trade from anywhere in the world, and that's basically what we're accustomed to. So how can we create policies that will allow St. Maarten also to capitalize on this? And obviously looking to make sure that we remove all of the obstacles in the way of us not achieving market openness. So allowing for a business-friendly environment that allows foreign and domestic firms to be able to compete on an equal footing. And obviously international investment comes with a lot of benefits, and allowing this kind of market openness allows us to benefit from things such as technology spillovers, transfer of technological knowledge, and the development of human capital. Sometimes we can learn from, you know, bigger corporations that are willing to invest here. So we have to make sure that we have policies in place that we're able to capitalize from these potential benefits. So regulatory framework should include policies to, like, for instance, to what extent are the procurement processes open and transparent. This is somewhat different from what I mentioned before, but the OECD, for instance, framework, which I believe will be something that once we get from the vision phase to the execution phase, where we'll go down the checklist and we'll ask ourselves the questions, the important questions that need to be answered, so that we can develop a clear and concise policy to be able to allow for market openness and competition and regulatory policy. So goal 13, this is obviously in present tense because we understood very clearly and we all noticed from the previous presentation. Oh, I have to stop? Okay, I am at the end, I am being cut off. That was a fast 10 minutes. All right, well, I would like to thank you guys very much for your attention. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to the last slide. However, the presentation will be supplied to you, so if you have any questions, you can, sorry? I can finish my last slide? All right, great. All right. So in goal 13, let me see here. So if we're looking at national competitiveness, this is defined as the advantage of a nation as its capacity to entice firms, right? And basically in the National Development Vision Plan, they're using productivity, so the productivity of businesses, so the services that they provide, the quality of the services as a measure, right? As a measure to measure productivity. But in order for us to get to that level, because obviously that is the vision, we want to be able to say that all of our businesses are producing on a top level, we have to ask ourselves some important questions in order to reach that level of productivity, right? And some of the things that I would ask myself are, what are the obstacles that the current local and foreign businesses are facing? For instance, with international payments, the tax structure, the red tape when it comes to permits. There's a lot of obstacles that local businesses face, but international businesses will face as well, and we have to figure out how we can reduce those obstacles in order to promote productivity. And how do we audit our existing sectors? Because we're saying, for instance, that we want to expand our sectors. So how do we audit our current sectors, whether that's in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, taking a look at, okay, what do we have and what do we aspire to have, and how do we create incentive packages to attract? So for instance, we often hear agriculture come back, but if that is seriously a goal of ours, how do we intend to incentivize agriculture in order to promote these new sectors and to welcome foreign investment? So I'd like to thank you guys very much for your attention and my take on goal 12 and 13. Have a wonderful, productive day.
The goal is to improve in all aspects. And that's the whole purpose of the National Development Vision, to improve. And we're trying to improve today compared to yesterday. And for that reason, we've asked the presenters to please remain within the time that is given to them. So we want to thank Jennifer, but we had to allow her to do her final slide since she said she was on the final. So let's thank Jennifer one more time for that information. We have one more presenter, and then we'll take our break. And after the break, then we'll have the panel discussion. So we're looking forward to that. We're doing very good with time, so we'll now call on our final presenter for this segment this morning. Her Her name is Jessica Rogers, and she's going to be presenting on the topic, yes, St. Martin's economy supports sustainable and resilient development. Ms. Rogers, Jessica Rogers, is a policy advisor at the Department of Economy, Transportation and Telecommunications in the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Transport and Communication. She was born and raised on the island of St. Martin and has been contributing to our economy for several years now. She successfully completed her studies in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada in 2015, where she obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in Economics and Business Administration. Presenting on the topic, St. Martin's economy supports sustainable and resilient development, please welcome Ms. Jessica Rogers.
Good morning, everyone. Protocol is being established. I have to say it, I'm very nervous, okay? That's the only way to get over it is by saying you're actually nervous. So it is my honor to be here on behalf of the ministry and also on behalf of my department. And I am here today, hopefully within the 10 minutes. It's a broad topic, but of course the idea is that I would like to get through all our slides today to ensure that you kind of have a good view of what the ministry is focusing on when it comes to economic development. So just some highlights of what I'll be talking about today. The ministry's philosophy and strategy that we've been using since 2019, 2020 after the pandemic. Tourism development, economic development, diversification areas that we are looking at, critical junctures and dilemmas, because of course, nothing goes smoothly, and then what we're seeing with the National Development Vision for 2030. Now, Ife kind of stole my premise in the beginning, but you know, great minds think alike. So I have to think on my feet now, and I switch it up a bit. And this is something that we often do within the ministry itself, within the department itself, because we really focus on policy, but it's one thing to have a foundation and the fundamentals, but making sure that you can now execute is also important. So this is St. Martin, a bird's eye view. St. Martin's economy supports sustainable and resilient development. What role do you play? And that's often a question we tend to forget to ask one another. And everyone has the dependency that government does everything, every and anything. But we all have specific roles we play as an individual and also within our relevant institutions. So taking that into consideration, here's how we have consolidated all our findings for you. The ministry's philosophy. Okay, my eyes are bad, so sorry for my eye contact, but I need to read from the screen. We aim to stimulate sustainable economic growth, provide economic relief, and further tourism development whilst creating employment and economic opportunities for the people of St. Martin. To do so, we must outline the relevant statistics, list critical dilemmas, and explore diversification areas to assist with decision-making on the short term and long term for the country of St. Martin. What we do as a department, or even just as a ministry, is advise. And what we do is gather that information to ensure our decision makers know exactly the direction that they're going. And that's what we're doing here today with this National Development Vision. The strategy that we took was to restore, promote, and protect tourism. It is our golden child. We cannot not do tourism. But it means that we have to ensure that we restore it after all the external shocks we've received. We've now grown it and diversified within it to ensure its sustainability in the long run. While doing so, of course, because everything happens in a parallel aspect, we have to ensure that we create an attractive business environment, heavily and predominantly looking at investment and the policies around that. What role do we play? How can we do that? And of course, you've heard my colleagues touch on that a lot earlier today. And we have the word here, real. Build real economic diversification. If it's one thing we've known is that St. Maarten has a strategic position within the Caribbean. We're a hub for various reasons. So how do we maintain that comparative advantage through diversification in the long run? Tourism development, just to touch on what we've done since 2019-2020. Of course, we've increased tourism travels, tourism arrivals through stay over and cruise, heads in beds, that's always our logo. And we've also looked at developing year-round tourism, so through diversification with niche markets. We've had a tendency of saying there's an on and off season for tourism. We've moved that now to there's a high and a low. So now by 2030, we just have tourism, and it's doing well. And there are various events that help us to sustain that from an all-year-round basis. Hence why the calendar of events that we've been focusing on is important. So at different times of the years, you have different groups on the island partaking in different activities or initiatives to ensure continuity. And all of this can only come with improving our product and our service. Our product is our island. It's our environment. It's what we have to offer. And the people are the ones that showcase that from a quality perspective. The service they provide, the knowledge they share. So it's important that we maintain that through various trainings and programs as we go along. You can only do good business when you know your customer. And we do. We've seen within the past couple of years that our customer comes from specific geographic areas, and I'm sorry that's a bit small on the screen, but they come predominantly from the North America region. We know the niche markets they are interested in: luxury, health, wellness, culinary, sports. We know the demographics. We do have a generation that is focused on timeshare, but then we're seeing a lot of those frequent individual travelers or just even families having to explore, digital nomads. And then we know the lifestyle that they enjoy. They want to be outdoors. They want to have an experience. They want to have longer stays. You know, they want to be induced in culture. And that was part of the theme yesterday, ensuring that we have that cultural heritage as well that we can showcase when they're here. As it pertains to further economic development, what we also looked at was, of course, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, there's a need to audit some of your processes and what you do. And of course, there were relevant papers put out recently that the department also looked at for further recommendations. One was in tangent with our country package, so SAO. The other was from the central bank, which is a constant partner we liaison with. And the third was the integrity chamber. And it's all about how effectively are we doing business. So the economic development from a high level perspective, because we can talk about this all day, but the two areas that we wanted to highlight was the required initiatives to improve the investment climate. So how are we attracting? And these thoughts are not just coming from us sitting behind our desk. Several consultations within the ministry, across ministries, with stakeholders, and with other government entities across the region. Because we're all doing the same thing. So how can we do it to the best of our capacity with our resources? So we're looking at the need for an investment promotion agency, a guide, a website, ensuring that you have digitalized processes, and of course, financial incentives and fiscal reform. But also looking at, we do have an entrepreneurial climate here. You can't forget them. So how are we then ensuring that they're integrated and they too aren't on the fence about doing business in St. Maarten? So addressing administrative concerns within our ministry, exploring financial incentives for them as well, and providing more support with any trainings that we can provide, and we are currently doing that with A&E accounting, for example. Now the diversification areas that we mentioned, we took it from the perspective of the orange, the blue, and the green economy. Orange economy being more the creative industries, the blue economy being maritime and yachting, and the green being agriculture and renewable. And these are the areas that are considered to be the low-hanging fruit. And of course, diversification can never happen overnight. But it's adamant that we start with what we do best and ensure with these other areas that we start to actually make tracks in those directions to ensure that by 2030 we are there. The critical junctures and dilemmas. So we've done a lot. We've experienced a lot. But what does that mean? Sometimes we have growth, or sometimes we have development that tends to clash. So we've increased our tourism and cruise arrivals. We saw an increase in tourism expenditure, so the amount of funds that people were spending, but that did not necessarily mean that the expenditure was viewed or can be seen in government revenue, right? In addition to that, we are targeting higher income earners, and we saw that we had a bit more of a better result where that was concerned. But does that then mean that they want a quality experience or a different type of experience when they get here? Not walking through back street, but maybe wanting to see a name brand store, for example. Or not staying at a name brand hotel, but wanting a boutique hotel, for example. Stimulating the economy, we've seen an increase in business activity, which leads to spatial developments. We've had mixed zoning areas, commercial and residential. Of course, it comes with noise pollution. We've just had flooding over the weekend unexpectedly. So having to take those things into consideration, knowing that our infrastructure is limited, our land is limited, and we have elements from the past that we still have to work with. These are some of the key points we have to really focus on and consider when making these decisions moving forward. So all in all, by 2030, the Ministry of TIAT, government, what should we see? Higher exports and goods and services, improved investment climate, higher economic growth, increased public revenues from economic activities, better business support and targeting for financing, lower the cost of doing business and the cost of living, higher employment level, and improve capacity and educational possibilities. Thank you.
I think we can do better than that for this young lady. And she started off talking about, she was just trying to throw us off. That's all she was trying to do. That's the trick, you know, I'm going to say I'm nervous. And excellent presentation by Ms. Jessica Rogers. Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers, for a job well done. And folks, we are going to change up the program a little bit. But before that, I need you to give an applause for all Raquel Lofowang, Ife Badijo, Jennifer Carty, and Jessica Rogers. Thank you all, ladies, for excellent presentation and invaluable information shared this morning. Now I was told not everything is ready there yet, so we're going to take a 5-minute, you know, the restroom kind of break, stretch your legs and stuff. After 5 minutes, we'll come back and start the panel discussion. We'll hear from the panelists. Then we'll take our real break, and after that, we'll come back and do the question and answer session with the panelists, so you will also get the opportunity to pose questions to our panelists. So we'll have a 5 minutes, bathroom, stretch your legs, and 5 minutes.
Stronger together, a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin National Development Plan. Share your voice, shape your future. We building a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin development is about you and me, living in unity in this new country, seeing the vision, moving forward, stronger together. A nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin National Development Plan. Share your voice, shape your future. We building a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin development is about you and me, living in unity in this new country, seeing the vision, moving forward, stronger together. A nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin National Development Plan. Share your voice, shape your future. We building a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin.
All right. Folks, we want to start back with the panel discussion. We're going to start in 2 minutes. So I'll ask you to please, let's get to our seats and have an interesting panel discussion.
Is about you and me, living in unity in this new country, seeing the vision, moving forward, stronger together. A nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin National Development Plan. Share your voice, shape your future. We building a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Martin development is about you and me, living in unity in this new country, seeing the vision, moving forward, stronger together. A nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation that is sweet, so sweet. My sweet St. Martin land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come Come let your voices be heard. We're growing stronger, stronger together. St. Maarten National Development Plan. Share your voice, shape your future. We building a nation that is strong, real strong. Building a nation
Okay,
that is sweet.
I think we're ready to begin.
My sweet St. Maarten land, surrounded by beach and sand. Come let your voices be heard.
This is the part of the program where we get the opportunity for you, the audience, to be involved with our panel and the panel discussion. And at this time, I'm going to call on, well, I see we have a few folks there that are still, yeah. Okay, nice. At this time, I'm going to call on the moderator who's going to conduct the panel discussion. Please help me welcome Lisanne Charles.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tobias. So we've had a full morning already of very interesting presentations from Ms. Lofo Wong, Ms. Badijo, Ms. Cardi, and Ms. Rogers. Thank you very much for that. I think for me, it's already been a lot of food for further and future thought, so I'm hoping it's the same for everyone in the room. We have a full session with 3 panelists. You can hear me now? Okay, so we have a full session with 3 panelists coming up. And after that, we're going to take a short break. So after their presentation, we're going to take a short break. And then I'm going to invite them back up. And then we're going to have a discussion where your questions will be presented to them. And they'll have the opportunity to answer. So having said all of that, we're going to jump right into our first presentation, which is on Goal 11, which is SMEs are the engine of economic growth and social development. And the person who will be presenting this is Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒆𝒏𝒈𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈, who is currently functioning in the role of head of the Department of Economy, Transportation, and Telecommunications, widely known as the Policy Department of the Ministry of 𝒕𝒏, where the focus is on the development of policies and regulations that promote sustainable economic development. Born on St. Maarten on April 16, 1985, Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒆𝒏𝒈𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈 holds a bachelor's degree in international hospitality and business management from the Euro College Hogeschool in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒆𝒏𝒈𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈 is also currently finalizing her bachelor's at the University of Curaçao. Valia's professional career started at the St. Maarten Hospitality and Trade Association in 2007, where she spent 5 years before making her transition to the Ministry of 𝒕𝒏. She has held numerous positions at this ministry, including Tourism Policy Advisor to the Minister from June 2012 to May 2013, and also head of the Department of Economic Licenses from November 2013 until February 2020, where she made noticeable improvements to the licensing system. So, Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒆𝒏𝒈𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈, please come. The podium is yours. Please give her your attention.
Good morning, everyone. Tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. So for today's presentation, I'm going to be discussing what is an MSME, the importance of SMEs on St. Maarten, and I will use a term, I will interchange between SMEs and MSMEs because our national policy, we adopted the term MSMEs, but the term is widely known as SMEs. I'm also going to go into the challenges faced by SMEs, the strategies for the development of SMEs, basically the universal strategies, and government's efforts and how we adopted those strategies locally. So it's important to first mention that there's no universal definition. Basically, different countries throughout the world use different criteria to determine what their definition of an SME or MSME would be in their respective countries. And this can be from this can range from the number of employees to the height of the investment to the gross profit. But for St. Maarten, we decided to adopt a combination of the maximum number of employees and the maximum annual turnover. So on the table displayed, you would see for micro enterprises, businesses that fall within that category have a maximum or should have a maximum employment of 5 employees, a maximum annual turnover of 180,000 guilders. For small enterprises, it's between 6 and 10 employees and a maximum annual turnover of 600,000 guilders. And for medium enterprises, between 11 and 20 employees and a max annual turnover of 1.2 million guilders. Of course, complex situations can arise, and if there is a complex situation, then the maximum annual turnover would be the deciding factor. So for example, you may have an enterprise that has, let's say, 20 employees, but the annual turnover is 1.5 million guilders. In that case, it no longer falls within the category of a medium enterprise. It would then be outside the SME category. Next, I'll jump into the importance of SMEs. So SMEs are important to almost all economies, especially small developing economies like St. Maarten, and they contribute to the overall output of the economy while simultaneously cushioning rising unemployment. They also contribute directly and often significantly to aggregate savings and investment. More specifically, the value of SMEs can be identified as follows. They are an engines of economic growth. They're critical for poverty alleviation. They're an excellent source of government revenue, vital sources of job opportunities. They're essential drivers of competition and market efficiency, and they are major sources of technological innovation and new products. As it pertains to the challenges faced by SMEs, they actually face unique challenges that are not common to large enterprises. Such challenges include the large percentage of time and resources allocated to tax and legal compliance and administrative tasks necessary to carry out their businesses. They also often lack key skills in human resource management, accounting, and business management. In addition, they often have little knowledge and access to business development services that they so desperately need for the operation of their businesses. So the universal strategies for the development of SMEs that we have adopted in our national SME policy are, firstly, to create an environment in which entrepreneurs and family businesses can thrive and entrepreneurship is rewarded. So for this, you can think of continuous education and training and the general promotion of entrepreneurship. Secondly, to create an institutional environment or use the think small first principle. With this, we can think of incentives for SMEs such as lowered income tax and other fiscal incentives that can help SMEs to progress, and also legislative simplification. The third point is creating an operational environment, so make public administrations responsive to MSMEs' needs. And this can include, for example, streamlining the business registration process and the business licensing process, making it less costly and time-consuming. The fourth point is the provision of information and support services and to facilitate SMEs' participation in public procurement. And I must say we have seen this happen over the years where a percentage of government work or contractual work for government and pseudo-government companies are awarded to SMEs. The fifth point is to facilitate SMEs' access to finance. I think that speaks for itself. The sixth point is to promote the upgrading of skills in SMEs and all forms of innovation. And again, we come to entrepreneurial skills and the provision of support services. The seventh point is the green economy to enable SMEs to turn environmental challenges into opportunities. And so we can do this by promoting eco-efficient businesses and promoting environmental management systems. The eighth point is internationalization, which is to encourage and support SMEs to benefit from the growth of markets. And so we can look at export training, training in labeling, standards, mass production, branding, and marketing. As it pertains to ongoing government efforts, while we don't want to take the credit for credits, we still do. I think the Ministry of TIAT and government on a whole was instrumental in allowing credits to be established on St. Maarten. I remember I wasn't in the department as yet, but I was in the ministry, and I do recall that simultaneously to the establishment of credits, we were supposed to establish a small business development center, but due to the passing of Hurricane Irma and Maria, the funds were just no longer available. So we have done other things. Following the passing of the Hurricanes Irma and Maria, we have the Enterprise Support Program, which is running and which has evolved throughout the years from more of a fund to help existing entrepreneurs to now a fund that also assists startups. We also updated the MSME policy in 2021 to reflect what I mentioned before. And also, while we do not have the funds to establish an SBDC, so a Small Business Development Center, what we do have are funds to engage in partnerships. And so one of the partnerships that took us a while to get off the ground, but eventually it did get off the ground, is the SME Entrepreneurship Development Program, the SEDP, which launched, I believe, in September. We actually had an overwhelming response of applicants, over 100 applicants, and we ended up in the end with, I believe, 63 candidates who are going through a year-long training and development program. And because we don't want to leave anyone behind, we're also looking to see how we can facilitate the remainder of the persons who did not make it into the program. And of course, we have to discuss a more long-term partnership coming out of this program. And then I'm going to touch in the following slides more on the country package measure E6, which is to stimulate the entrepreneurial and investment climate, and some of the ongoing programs or projects and measures that we're going to be doing for the next 2 to 3 years. So I think most of you in this room are familiar with the SEO report, the SEO Amsterdam report. And there were many measures, well, I believe 5 to 6 measures that came out of that report, but many sub-measures. And as a ministry, we could only adapt those that we are directly responsible for. So there may be sub-measures in here that you would have liked to see, that they may come back in another country package measure. So for us, we have divided the measures into small, mid, and long term. And short, short, mid, and long term. The short-term measures would be done by March 2023, midterm, June 2023, and long-term by January, February 2024. And the long-term is really those that require legislative change because, as you know, we do not have sufficient legislative capacity on island, so we do require some assistance. So I'm just going to go through the measures quickly. The measure 1, to optimize and modernize the licensing system. So we have our plan, and I think about half of these are short to mid-term measures. So we plan to define the objective of every license and permit and place it in line with the current economic situation. And this also means that we may have to abolish unnecessary licenses or unnecessary parts of licenses. We also plan to develop on the short term clear criteria or requirements for obtaining a license or a permit. We have already allocated authority for decision making, not to the SG, but to the department head. We plan to look into abolishing or substantially lowering annual fees for certain licenses, and also replace the ex-ante operational checks with ex-post requirements. So this basically means for licenses such as restaurant licenses, operational licenses, that usually take some time to be processed because of all of the requirements that are necessary beforehand. We want to replace those requirements beforehand, replace those checks beforehand with requirements after the fact to give these entrepreneurs a fighting chance, because the longer the process takes, they still have to pay rent, and they're technically, legally not allowed to operate. So we want to make sure that they're within the realm, operating within the realms of the law. We're also looking at creating a lex silencio positivo for licenses, which means a change to the way the law is right now. Right now, if you don't hear from government within 6 weeks, for example, it's an automatic no. But we want to switch that. So where once we identify certain types of licenses that are easy, they don't have any impact on other ministries or other processes, and so they would get basically an automatic yes. We are also re-evaluating the list of moratoria and looking to loosen and abolish where necessary. The third measure from the CEO report that we are looking into is to bolster entrepreneurial access to knowledge and skills. So we look at, I believe these are also short to midterm measures, sub-measures. We are creating a centralized online overview of all requirements, all the steps needed to open a business, and we're working with the Chamber of Commerce to have this put on the Chamber's website. We're looking to provide entrepreneurs with a standardized information package on taxes, business administration, labor requirements, and that would be given to them from the time that they register at the chamber. And we're also looking to provide on and offline educational programs on taxes, business administration, labor requirements, etc. And the last measure, I'm still within time, I don't see any red flags, good. The last measure is measure number 5, which is to improve the effectiveness of products and service markets. And basically, there's one sub-measure that we've adopted, and that is to introduce a competition law with private enforcement. While St. Maarten may be the only territory, I use that term loosely, within the Dutch Kingdom that does not have a competition authority, because of our financial situation, we cannot afford to have an authority at this moment. So we're looking at establishing the law still, because we do feel like it's necessary. I think some of the previous speakers did identify the need for competition law and competition policy. We plan to implement competition law, but with private enforcement. So this means basically that if Company A feels that Company B is infringing or practicing unethical business practices and so forth, then they can take the matter to court for the judge to decide. It's not ideal, but it's a start. So in conclusion, the development of SMEs on St. Maarten is key for sustainable economic development. Our intention is to achieve a cohesive approach towards stimulating sustainable SMEs through the facilitation of services, simplification of processes, provision of incentives and access to finance, training, and export markets. Additionally, government seeks to encourage innovation amongst entrepreneurs to contribute towards economic diversification. And with that, I thank you, and I await the question segment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pantoflet. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Okay, we're going to move right along to Goal 12, which is an efficient and enabling regulatory framework for local businesses is linked to a transparent, broad policy environment for investment. To present on this topic, we have Natasha Gums, who is a senior tax accountant at Prudential Tax Services. Natasha Manuela Gums is a daughter of the soil who holds a master's degree in accounting and finance and certifications from worldwide recognized institutions, making her an internal and external lead auditor whose accreditation is globally recognized and whose professional opinions are highly valued and sought after. She is characterized as promoting trust and assertive judgment as enterprising business fundamentals in her work ethic. Please, Ms. Natasha Gums, the podium is now yours.
Good morning, everyone. With protocol already being established, a pleasant good morning to one and all. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this monumental event and for putting together St. Martin's National Development Vision 2013 and beyond. It is indeed for us to grow stronger together. Now, let's put it this way. Sitting there and listening to all of my foregoing speakers, I was wondering to myself, nervous and shaking, should I run through the door, because they said everything that has been needed to be said that I also have in my presentation. But I said, let me continue speaking, but I'm going to change my slides a little bit, so forgive me if my slides does not correspond to what I'm saying. But instead of doing it on a corporate level, I have decided to speak as a local business person and the challenges that we face being with government and how we can proceed further together. Okay. The main topic that I will be speaking on this morning is Goal 12, which is an efficient and enabling regulatory framework for local businesses linked to a transparent, broad, and policy environment for investment. I have taken this topic and divided it into two sections that are of importance to us as local entrepreneurs. First is the administrative burdens. Administrative burdens are the cost to businesses and citizens of complying with the information obligation resulting from government-imposed legislations and registrations. The policies that are in place right now are sorry, I'm nervous. I am so nervous. Okay. Administrative burdens are the cost that we as local businesses incur to be able to be compliant when we want to register our business. And as was said before me, and I saw on another slide also, the implementation of a one-stop shop, whereby all local and foreign investors would be able to come to one entity and be able to register their business with their documentation that is needed. And this information can be assimilated to every government department that is needed for the businesses at large. The cons of said organization is the lack of communication and the division amongst the government entities on a whole, and also the cost that it will incur government to be able to put said one-stop shop together, because there are costs involved to put policies and legislations together to make this dream and vision work. But the pros, so the good side on that, once it is properly set up together, the data entered will be shared to all public entities, tax authorities, SxM, Chamber of Commerce, Ministry of Justice, just to name a few. So instead of having to go from the Chamber of Commerce to register to the tax office to economic affairs, everything will be done in one department. So with all your documentation, you take it to one department, and that is streamlined to every other department that is needed, which gives government a better control over the population on a whole. More pros. It promotes the involvement and the participation of citizens in the local public life, and it secures public trust, because we always hear us as local businesses complaining that government is inconsiderate, we are not getting the assistance that is needed. So once this is in place, that saves that. And it also ensures unity with both the community and government together. It's a long shot, but it's a vision. To continue to part 2, dissemination information across government apparatus, seamlessly as well as to the business community and all citizens. With that being said, we are speaking about giving information to all of small businesses. These are the challenges that we face. Difficulties receiving bank loans because we are seen as a threat to the bank, and the down payment that is being asked is impossible for us as local businesses to be able to achieve. Government's demands and requirements that are really realistic to us as SMEs where it comes to bidding for governmental projects. The government often delays payments, which is disastrous for us as small businesses. It's easy for a big company to be able to hold 3 and 4 months of payroll, but for us, on a monthly basis, it's difficult and discouraging. Solutions. Issuing of loans and grants, where we at this point in time, we have NRPB, we have credits that has come to our aid to assist us as local businesses to be able to function in the market. Better tax policies for SMEs, giving us incentives. Yes, we all have to pay taxes for the country to run, but at least make things more beneficial for us. Implement incentive policies for us to collaborate with the bigger companies. As was also mentioned before, that now government in the bidding processes, subcontractors, as us local small businesses, are also given the opportunity to assist with the big contractors to get the work done, for everyone counts in the community. We face a lot of marketing and business challenges. The lack of resources along with exposure. Many small businesses know how to do the work, but they lack the exposure to be able to get that work done. The lack of knowledge of compliancy, which means compliancy, meaning that most companies do not understand the tax system. We have many and many companies. As a local business, as a local accountant, I encounter many companies that complain that they do not understand the business economics of the island. The solution to this is reinstating the Small Business Association. We had that before, where businesses could have gone and gotten assistance, someone there that is able to explain small businesses the ins and outs of our tax system. Yes, we have government. I must applaud you 100%. I must also applaud Miss Anne Marlin Evans for the small business opportunities that we have on this island. It's very, very encouraging. And as entrepreneurs, we are able to grow, we are able to expand, we are able to show our true capabilities because we are the back burners of every community. We contribute more as small businesses than the major companies that are here on the island. So I do applaud government for that initiative in giving that opportunity. But I must say, the same as the before speaker also mentioned, we lack the tax and compliance trainings in these type of trainings. It teaches us all to be entrepreneurs, but many times as entrepreneurs, we do not understand where we go from there. So we have our businesses open, but we don't last because we are not compliant. So as a local business person, I encourage government to also involve more tax compliance organizations whereby we would be able to understand the mechanism within the tax to be able to put back money into the coffers, because now we are doing different programs at the cost of government. But where is the return on investment? The return on investment is us as the taxpayers making sure that we are tax compliant. So it's not only a one-way street. Thank you, and I applaud our government for installing in us what many did not see. But remember, we now have to also give back so that the engine can run. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gums. That presentation really resonated with me. I mean, I enjoyed all of the speakers so far for the morning, but I actually really got goosebumps listening to you. So all of the nervousness was for naught because you did very, very well. So before we go to our break, we have our last presenter. And then remember, we're going to have about a 10-minute break so that you can have some sandwiches, something to drink. Then we're going to call you back. The panelists will come sit down, and you can have your questions ready for them. So our third presenter is Mr. Alex Gums. Mr. Alex Gums, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Port of St. Maarten Group of Companies. He has a deep passion for the maritime and tourism industry. Mr. Gums began as an intern at Port of St. Maarten in 2010 and worked in various capacities through mid-2019. Before becoming the CEO of Port of St. Maarten in October 2021, he worked for the largest global cruise company, Carnival Corporation, and was based in Freeport, Grand Bahama, the Bahamas, focusing on their new port development, Grand Port. He was also the director of Port of Operations and Development in Grand Turk, Turks and Caicos. Gums went to MPC and further obtained a Bachelor's of Commerce and a Master's of Management and Leadership. He will speak on Goal 15, which is leveraging its unique position in the Caribbean. Mr. Gums, the podium is now yours.
Good morning, everyone. I gotta go down a bit more. I know everybody ready for lunch. I will not be too long. As I was given, I am? As I was given 10 minutes to speak. Now, 10 minutes to me is a bit difficult because you want to explain everything. But of course, I'll try my best to condense the discussion. We have about 5 slides to go through. And of course, I would like to thank the hosting committee for inviting Port St. Maarten here to speak today. From a port perspective, cruise, we've come from the darkest of pit when you come from the pandemic standpoint. And of course, I heard a note from Ms. Lofa Wong, who was the keynote address in terms of cruise not necessarily being back to where it was prior. We're still hoping that this year we'll exit around around 1 million cruise passengers, which is a tad bit under pre-pandemic levels. As you all may have seen as well, yesterday we had our four-ship day, so we consider it as the official start of the cruise season. And today in the newspaper, thanks of course to the Council of Ministers for approving the plan from Royal Caribbean Group in collaboration with the port as well, the new water park and boutique hotel in Point Blanche. I just wanted to mention this because when I looked at the comments online, I saw a lot of persons requiring and asking if the park will actually be open for locals. And the answer is yes. So I know we are live streaming. Hopefully that's also heard. Yes, the water park will be open for locals. Today, in this presentation, this discussion rather, we'll be talking about Goal 15 of the National Development Vision. And Goal 15, I highlighted or underscored some keywords, some buzzwords in there. And as the moderator mentioned prior, you all have the report on the USB stick, so I assume you'll all read it. Nevertheless, if I look at those keywords, diversify, we have a one-pillar economy, looking at expanding trade routes, speaking of collaboration with the harbor and the airport, which I think is very important from a connectivity standpoint, looking at strategic partnerships, not only on island, but of course with international stakeholders, such as what was presented in the newspaper today with Royal Caribbean. And of course, last but not least, youth exchanges. And for us as a port from a social standpoint, and for me, and I think you heard in my bio, coming from an intern, having the opportunity to stand here today as a CEO of Port St. Maarten Group, in my opinion, our opinion, one of the best companies on the island, despite what may be published, I think that there's many opportunities for youth in that regard. Now, looking at this particular goal, of course, in discussion, more questions come to mind. When we speak about a logistic hub, what do we mean? What do we really mean by a logistic hub? When we talk about transshipment and containers, are we talking about only containers that come to St. Maarten to go to some of the smaller islands? Are we also talking about a transitional hub in terms of full import to St. Maarten, meaning more developments to support that, more commerce? If we look at the developments in other destinations as well, what drives those destinations? What drive those destinations that St. Maarten actually feed as a hub? If you think about it, they're all dependent on tourism. So one way or the other, we can speak about diversification, but really and truly from a transition hub perspective, we are very much still dependent on tourism from those destinations. When we speak about the airport, are we talking about a sub-hub for persons to fly in and leave to some of the other destinations, such as we saw in one of the presentations earlier? Are we talking about a hub for persons to come to St. Maarten and do day trips to other destinations and return with a majority part on the island? These are all questions in that regard that needs to be worked out. But if you look at it from a leveraging position, a location, a geographic position of where the St. Maarten is as an island, if you look at how we became rather very successful in a cruise standpoint, you also look at angles in terms of the itineraries, right? So let's say 10 years back, 7-day itineraries were very interesting, very popular. St. Maarten is on the end of the 7-day itineraries out of Miami. Today, we have a lot more lines looking at 4- and 5-day itineraries. Now, of course, St. Maarten does not fall within the 4- and 5-day itineraries. So what does that mean for the future? What does it mean when you look at carbon emissions? What does it mean from ESG? And here we go to the next two other items that I saw in the report that stuck out to me as well. One is investment in public infrastructure. We look at how do we position ourselves, but positioning ourselves is one thing, increases in volume to the destination is the other thing, but a lot of attention in the coming years from a country perspective and also to support the enhancements and developments surrounding cruise tourism, to support enhancement and development regarding the cargo standpoint, and to a great extent, if you also build more on island, more persons flying in, then our infrastructure needs attention. But besides the infrastructure, of course, environment. If you think about the environment, that is a key buzzword right now. I can recall I went to a cruise conference, I believe, in January this year, and I kid you not, out of 10 panel discussions, 9 of them, the buzzword was ESG. And to this day, sometimes I say the word ESG, and people watch me like, huh, the strangest look on their face. But ESG is really simple. In the past, we used to talk about CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. Very interesting in everyone's core values, et cetera, But now they look at ESG, environment, social, and governance. When you look at those terms, there's banking institutions that actually give percentage discounts for loans and mortgages based on ESG standard. There's institutions now that are all determining where ships go based on the ESG opportunities and the destinations. I look at my colleagues here, Benjamin Ortega and Leila Simmons. We were just at another conference in Orlando recently, and one of the key discussions up until 3 days ago, we received inquiries from brands in terms of, can St. Maarten plug in ships while in port? Can St. Maarten support us with reducing our carbon emissions, which is good for their carbon credits from a brand perspective, which is good from a destination standpoint, from an environmental perspective. But if you think about the output that's needed to actually feed those vessels, I believe at peak, GB has about 60 megawatts that GB can provide. The largest cruise ship that was in the port yesterday, Symphony of the Seas, 14 megawatts, 1-4. So one cruise ship, 14 megawatts. So we also have to be realistic in terms of what the destination or the port, from a very strategic and competitive perspective, what we can actually facilitate with. But it put us now to think. We speak about the National Development Vision for 2030, but from a port perspective, we are also looking a bit further, because we can already foresee in 10, 12 years, if we all collectively don't step our game up, we will lose business. And not losing business, not because we're not a great destination, not because we don't have friendly people, not because we don't have maybe a little bit of tax then, but duty-free for now. But if you look at it from a collective standpoint, the word ESG is key. And that is something that, from a National Development Vision Plan, I think it's something that we need to all focus on in regard to where we go next. I just keep talking, I didn't change the slide, my bad. But from a cruise perspective as well, they too have made firm commitments to 2050 in terms of becoming carbon net zero. Carbon net zero. There's destinations who are a bit ahead of us now in terms of shore power. So you have Guadeloupe and Dominica looking at geothermal energy because, of course, they have volcanoes. We don't. There were discussions recently. I know government been having discussions as well. Is there a stable source from Sable to source thermal energy to the destination that can also feed back into the grid? Think about solar, from a port perspective. Looking at the solar aspect as well for us is also very interesting. And I did not want to go too much in this discussion, rather I say a presentation, because it's only 10 minutes in terms of ratings and all of the reviews from the passengers, etc. But I wanted the emphasis to be that all of us collectively here, from a business perspective, from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, need to center our thought processes, our path forward, our strategy forward, in that one word up there in terms of ESG. There, I would like to leave this discussion for now, and I thank you, and I look forward to the panel discussion later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gums, and of course to the former presenters as well. I think listening to all three of them, what stuck out to me is how much we have to actually really start thinking from a nexus approach, how everything is actually connected to everything else, right? And we can't really just think about one thing moving forward. So I hope you all have lots of questions. I have lots and lots of questions, but part of being the host means that I can only ask one of two. So I hope that you all have your questions jotted down. We're going to take a 10-minute break now, 10 minutes, have some refreshments, come back to your seats, and we're going to jump right back into the panel discussion. Okay, if we can all come back to our seats. I'd like to call the panelists up to the table. No problem. Nobody listens to me yet. Mr. Gums, Ms. Pantuflet, Ms. Gums, if you would all come to the table, I would appreciate it. Okay, if those of you who are still grabbing your refreshments can do that, we're going to start. So I'm sure you would not want to miss being able to pose your questions. So if you would come back to your seat, that would be great. Okay, so again, we have Ms. Gums, Mr. Gums, and Ms. Pantuflet, who presented on goals 11, 12, and 15. So now the floor is going to be open for you to ask any questions. The only thing that I ask is that you keep your question posing to about 20 to 30 seconds so that we can get as many questions as possible, and also so that we can give the panelists due time to consider their answers. You can also ask a question to all of the panelists, or you can ask specifically to one, but other panelists are allowed to also answer if they are so inclined. So I actually wanted to start with a question that I also had for the panelists yesterday. And one of the things is because I'm very community-centered, right, and people-focused, one of the questions that I wanted to ask to the panelists is that, yes, there is a lot of information out there, right? I think Ms. Carty said that one of the things is we want to create like transparency and openness, right? So there is information out there, but people are still afraid, right, to engage with governments or to engage with NGOs or related organizations and entities. What advice would you give to people who have ideas or visions or dreams about entrepreneurship? What advice would you give them? What is their starting point? How do they create a mindset that would allow them to sort of jump into the market? And especially as Ms. Gum said, where it sometimes feels it's so bureaucratically burdened. So that is the question, and it's open to any one of you to start.
Thank you for the question. I'll just chime in briefly on this topic. I believe that it starts from a very young age, and I think that we have to start from when kids are younger. First and foremost, the sense of dependency or independency of young kids, but also I think with technologies, etc., will assist us from that group age to, let's say, thrive in that sense. However, if we think about it as well, and strange enough, I had a discussion with 𝒚𝒂𝒄𝒉, I believe a week ago, in terms of literature that would benefit young kids in a very fun way. Great book that he just released as well, but in a fun way and introduce them to the tourism product. At the end of the day, if you look at Goal 15, it speaks towards diversification, right? But I said it in my presentation or my discussion as well. If you look at what drives St. Maarten as a hub as well, it's tourism, right? So on one end, we speak about diversification and also from, let's say, our partners abroad. But on the other end, you're seeing discussions and reports of other destinations within the Dutch Kingdom that's actually now looking at tourism. So are we then going to diversify and then send tourists to the other destinations? But at the same time, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, it's about just standing up, getting forward, and helping. I think from the port perspective, what we've discussed as well is maybe to create more seminars, town hall type of sessions that would share information from a tourism standpoint, from a cruise tourism standpoint, but not only there, from a maritime standpoint in general, such as what Kids at Sea is doing, Godstein in a group, getting youngsters involved from younger. I think it just starts with getting them involved from younger.
Do any of the other panelists want to answer? Yes?
Yes, just to be a bit more specific. I think when someone makes a decision to become an entrepreneur, it's already a big step. And a lot of times we get lost in the dream and we don't really go from A to Z, think it out thoroughly. And I almost would say, you know, government has a huge role to play in this because we need to have a more welcoming environment. And for example, what Ms. Gums had said in her presentation, that whether it's a small business association or development center, we need to have an incubator that is welcoming to entrepreneurs, that basically takes them through the process, holds their hand through the process so that they feel comfortable starting with any project that they may think of.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to open the questions to the floor. So if you have a question, just indicate and I'm going to come with the mic. And if not, I have lots of questions, which is, you know, okay. I'll come to you afterward.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Mr. Denisio Wyatt, Managing Director of Spaces Gardens and President of St. Maarten Agricultural Research and Development Foundation. Sometimes I like to stick my nose and my tongue and everything, but Actually, it's good because I like the smell and the taste of the things that are coming in my garden, you know? So the reality is I really wanted to make a quick statement and ask a question at the same time. Over the 9 years that I've been conducting research on agricultural research and development on St. Maarten, and looking from since 2016, also working in collaboration with UNDP and looking at those 17 sustainable development goals, over the 9 years, I've come to realize that at the pillar of it all lies agriculture. And if we don't realize how important agriculture is at the foundation of our economy that can complement to no poverty, zero hunger, gender equality and opportunities, life on water, life below land, peaceful and justice institutions that are strengthening because of people having jobs and not having to turn to crime, we can go down the line till number 17, which is the most important one, which is partnership for goals. My question is, why are we not really taking agriculture to another level in the country, whereas it will be our driving force within ecotourism, self-sustainable development, import exportation? Right now, it adds nothing to our GDP. Why are we not, for example, I know Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈 and her team has been working and completed the agricultural policy, but even though the policy is done, how can we be reassured on the ground that the footwork and the investments in this very, very important sector, because you see, even though we sit down and we talk all morning, we still had to eat. When will we just give this one important sector the consideration and the respect that it actually needs? Thank you.
And is your question for Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈 or for the whole panel? So the question is for the entire panel.
Okay, I'll start. I agree with you, Mr. Wyatt. I think agriculture has been on the back burner for some time because St. Maarten is small and we have limitations. We have limitations where it comes to land, where it comes to expertise and so forth. But yes, we have been working on an agricultural policy, and for us it's not only about a document, but how to give the document hands and feet. And so we recently came back from a visioning process with all of the Dutch Caribbean countries/territories, where we discussed how we can work together to boost agriculture on all of the islands. Because St. Maarten is not the smallest island, but St. Maarten is far behind compared to even the smaller islands in the Caribbean when it comes to agriculture, livestock, and fisheries. So yes, we are in the process now of looking into all of the recommendations that, well, tips from other destinations, the best practices from other destinations within the Dutch Caribbean region, to see what we can copy-paste, what we can take on and adapt to fit St. Maarten, and how we can work together with our local stakeholders to basically give the policy hands and feet. And I must say the policy has not been fully approved as yet. It still has to be approved by the Council of Ministers, and I hope within the next few weeks we will be giving a presentation to the Council of Ministers so it will be approved and we can start to get work done on agriculture.
Good day, everyone. 𝒕𝒊𝒏𝒈𝒕𝒉𝒆𝒏𝒊𝒏𝒈 from Islandpreneur. This morning has been quite insightful, and I appreciate all of your comments and information. I have a question piggybacking off of Mr. Gum's comments about starting young. As I mentioned in my presentation, we're doing the National Youth Pitch Competition, and one of the things that and one of the reasons why I started Islandpreneur is because when you're looking for information to become an entrepreneur, you get it from the US, you get it from Europe. These days you get more information from Africa, but we don't have something that is tailored to our construct. We don't have LLCs here. We don't have that kind of tax structure here. And so my question is about books and information in book form or any other form as it pertains to entrepreneurship development, because if we don't have that, we're still going to be spinning reels at the end of the day. Even to do this project, we bought books, and actually the minister himself, who's here, Minister of Finance, bought books himself to try and find something for our young people. So the direct question is, what are some of the plans, or are there plans to create books, literature, information that is tailorized for young people as it pertains to entrepreneurship and small, medium enterprise development. For the whole panel.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Ife. And you know, that comment that I made was a brief discussion with the gentleman that I mentioned, and it would be more so the idea that it would be more so again, coming back to ESG, the S being social, the port's social responsibility as a corporate state-owned enterprise, but also we look at succession planning moving ahead as well. There's certain roles in a port that you just can't hire someone readily tomorrow. There's persons that's aging, and we also need to plan for the future. By planning for the future, you know, it also looks at our cargo standpoint, our cargo industry, the niche, everything that we eat, drink, at this point in time, where, you know, is important, 90%, 95%. Of course, as Mr. Wyatt in the back mentioned, hopefully we get more to the agriculture standpoint, but if you look at the importance of the cargo industry, when persons hear Port St. Maarten, they normally think cruise ships, yachts, etc. But you know, the real maritime aspect of it is neglected. You know, the hard works of our pilots who go and actually captain vessels, cruise ships, cruise ships to come into port. Our crane operators who operate the largest machines on island, right? But those are vacancies and great jobs, but we see it from a social standpoint to put it into pictures, put it into perspective, put it into color. Again, from youngsters having an understanding of what the port environment really entails, and maybe also say what those opportunities can be for them when they grow up. So not necessarily as yet from a business standpoint, Ife. You know, the port also appreciate what you do in your programming. I think we've participated in some of the programs. I know I had a discussion with Ms. Simmons as well, I believe a few days ago, in terms of moving ahead with a pitch. But you know, great work, and please continue to do your part as we collectively look at best introducing business to the youth. And we will do our best from a port maritime standpoint with other initiatives that we participate into.
To answer that question both to Mr. Wyatt and to Ms. Badijo, what I have seen many times, and you yourself, Ms. Badijo, have been chosen to go into different schools, into different institutions, to be able to talk about these topics that we are facing. And I believe, because at my son's school I've always seen it as well, where they have small gardens where they plant. So they teach them planting, they teach them agriculture, and then once those vegetables have been grown, it is sold to us as parents. So if we're seeing that in the smaller ages between 6 and 12 in certain schools, once we can continue that in every school area that we have, also as our local entrepreneurs, if we can get the opportunity to be an inspiration in every child's life, to be able to come into the schools, which I also had an opportunity a few weeks ago at the PSVE to come in and speak to the students and be able to educate them. Because remember, it's a vision. Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time for us to be able to get books and documentation on our local St. Martiners to be able to address it into the educational system. But together we grow, and together we will be the vision. All right, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Ayana Terrell. Ayana Terrell, the Ministry of General Affairs. I had a question for Ms. Pantaflet. I know that you made reference to the competition law, and I know that you stated that it will perhaps fall under private law in the sense that private citizens will then have to bring the action. Now, from a lawyer's perspective, I must say I don't necessarily agree with that route. I know that you said it's the foundation of it, but I think that going that route in itself will be a miscarriage of justice, because if a conglomerate or a major organization has more financial backing than smaller entity, then it's clear that they will not be able to start the action and actually maintain the action. So would a better route not be perhaps setting up a tribunal, or perhaps going around setting up a tribunal within the Ministry of TIAT to some sorts, or perhaps an ombudsman via the ombudsman route, to give it some sort of leg, or give the person an opportunity to have their rights before the judge, or however you choose to do it. And secondly, my question was for Mr. Gums in reference to tourism being introduced from an early stage. I think I read somewhere that in the Bahamas, anyone on the island is actually an ambassador of tourism in itself. So if we have that standpoint as an island nation where we are known as the friendly island, our friendliness is what sells us. But if we educate our people to make them aware that they are also ambassadors, every single person comes in contact with tourism. And we speak about diversification, but how about diversifying the tourism product in itself, diversification within the tourism product? And you spoke about ESG, but I'm going to stop right now. But there's so many different questions.
So first, Ms. Pantouflet, and then Mr. Gums.
Okay. I fully agree with you from my legal mind as well. Just a plug in. It's something that I brought up as well with my counterparts in the Netherlands, and we are having discussions, but they're not final, of possibly partnering with an existing authority within the kingdom, whether it be in the Caribbean countries or with the Netherlands itself. But those discussions are very premature, so we can't really speak on it. But I do agree. I've seen firsthand small businesses that get pushed out of the market by large businesses, conglomerates, and so forth. So I do agree with you, and I do share the same concern, and we're looking into it.
Thank you for that question. And yes, you're right. In many destinations, you actually have to undergo, and I know, not speaking on behalf of TIAT, but I know there were discussions as well in terms of connecting trainings to certain, let's say, licenses. In Dominica, it's like that, for example, where prior to you getting a vendor's license, a taxi license, etc., you need to go through first aid training, you need to go through some sort of service level training, and you need to go through some sort of history training. Now on that note, and as I also indicated yesterday, we had our first 4-ship day for this season. And I had a very interesting discussion, very interesting discussions with members of the Dutch St. Maarten Taxi Association, DSTA, that's the association in the port. And I must give kudos to their president, Ms. Maya Friday, who's doing an incredible job with that group. And I say with that group as they are the ambassadors of the country. Many times they are the first face that gets meat. And what they're doing, they're also conducting internal trainings and exams with candidates of the Taxi Association, assuring a streamlined message as well. From the port perspective, we were also in discussions with a company a few months ago in standardizing a similar type of training for all port users, meaning from the time you apply for a port pass, from the time you have access to the port on a daily basis, technically you are a key ambassador in the port. And I'm talking from all functions, all companies. That would go in tandem with that. So yes, I do agree that we need to look at how best, not only to diversify the current product, but how best can we optimize on the service that is being offered on island. And service in terms of having 4 out of 10 staff being service trained and not the other 6 can cost business. So, you know, from that standpoint, from the port standpoint, we're also looking at that, like I said, from a pass perspective. But looking at it widespread, I think that should be a key component in getting certain renewals tied into key history trainings of the destination, some sort of first aid training, and also some sort of general service level training.
So that the young lady didn't get to ask the question about ESG, so I will. My question is for you, Mr. Gums. In your presentation, you mentioned that the cruise industry is striving for more environmental, social governance. So in your opinion, and also for the ladies, from a country perspective and a policy perspective, what do you think are some of the quick wins in that regard?
Great question, Ms. Carty. From a country perspective, I think a lot more can be done along with our other government-owned company, being GB. I see opportunities for them to capitalize on this. And again, this was discussions from in the past as well. In terms of co-investing with households to invest in solar. Our neighbor recently also put solar, and his discussion was within 2.5 years, the return on investment was paid. Hope to God that there's no hurricanes that the solar panels fly away, but in 2.5 years. I think that's a great step forward. Another component is also looking at the general emissions of vehicles on a road, etc. That is something that we've seen in the Netherlands for many years now, that certain cars older than a certain age, I think it was 20 and 25 years, if a car is 20 years, 20 and 25 years, that they're not allowed to enter into the inner city anymore because of emissions perspectives. But also from a credit market standpoint, I think a lot of corporate institutions also have opportunities, just like as Ms. Lufo said, Central Bank is also looking at adding solar to the roofs. From a corporate standpoint, I do think that the hotels, the industries, the leaders, the captains of the industries need to sit and actually have discussions on this item. Really have a think tank of the leaders. We have the director of TELEM here today, Mr. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉. We've been having discussions of having a think tank with the various CEOs from the government institutions and align certain elements that make sense and doesn't make sense. I recently had a great meeting with the director of the Port Authority in Curacao as well, Humberto de Castro. And over the last 3 weeks, we've shared information, no confidential information, of course, for the record, but we've shared information in terms of how best we can assist each other with streamlining processes in the benefit of building itineraries. So from an ESG standpoint, we're only now seeing the tip of the iceberg of that topic. Effective January 1, our compliance department in the port will be renamed ESG Risk and Compliance, so ESGRC. But that will be a staple within Port St. Maarten as we move ahead.
If I may briefly, sometimes I think that we develop policies and maybe they're ahead of their time because it's not always for government to initiate things, in my opinion. And we had an energy policy on the books, and at the time, there was not enough, little to no initiative from, let's say, private sector to take on, for example, renewable energy. So what we're doing now is we're relooking at our energy policy. The government also has the roadmap with Grid Market to develop renewable energy on St. Maarten. Yes, and we also develop a work group between the Ministry of TIAT, the Ministry of 𝒐𝒐, and the Ministry of General Affairs to develop and work on different initiatives to promote renewable energy within the country.
Good afternoon, everyone. Benjamin Ortega from the port. I'm happy to have learned today that the competition law is being worked on, as we believe that leveling the playing field needs to start happening. And one of the other presenters spoke about KYC, Know Your Customer. But in particular for Ms. 𝒕𝒓𝒄𝒉, the Know Your Market. What are your thoughts with regards to the market of not redeveloping, but actually tapping into various markets that we are not tapping into? We spoke about what Mr. Wyatt is doing and ecotourism there, and what are your thoughts as a government's perspective on giving and focusing more energy on those markets, knowing your markets, are there research being done for this development as well?
Definitely in favor of, for example, the ecotourism. We also developed an investment and diversification policy, which we also have to present to COM in the coming weeks. And in that policy, we kind of explained how we got to our diversification areas that my colleague presented earlier. And you'll notice that a lot of the areas are still within tourism. You have ecotourism, etc. And it's based on the new concept of what tourists want to do, what visitors want to do. The visitor of the past, they may have enjoyed shopping, etc. The visitor of today is very much engulfed in local culture. They want to experience St. Maarten as a unique destination. They want to see why St. Maarten differs from any other Caribbean island, besides us having two nations on one island. To determine our diversification areas, we looked at different reports that had already been established for some time. And not trying to reinvent the wheel, we went through all of the recommendations that came forth in those documents because extensive research has already been done. So there was no need for us to go back and do another set of, we tend to do a lot of paperwork. So it was no need for us to go back and do extensive research again, but just go and cross-reference which industries, sub-industries came forth over and over and over, and let's see if they are realistic still today to implement today. And like my colleagues say, let's focus on real diversification. So not just, you had in the past, people would say, yeah, let's develop call centers, let's do this, let's do that, because others are doing it. But is it right for St. Maarten? Does our labor environment lend for that sort of industry? So we did have to go through a very comprehensive review of what's already been presented, what is still relevant for today in order for us to come up with what we think we should be pursuing as real diversification measures. And that, yes, once the policy has been approved by the Council of Ministers, it will be published.
Thank you for the question, Ortega. I know it's not necessarily directed towards my person, but I just wanted to add on, as we previously discussed as well. If you look at it from a home porting perspective, right? I was supposed to travel yesterday, but because of the potential hurricane approaching Miami, I made a change, and therefore I'm here today as well. So the presentation was made this morning, so still happy to be here. But getting to the point of home porting, nevertheless, if you look at the opportunity, and why I gave that example, if you look at the opportunity for inter-Caribbean travel, meaning flying to St. Maarten within the Caribbean, taking a cruise from St. Maarten to the Caribbean. Now, here's the benefits for that market, and this being the most busiest home porting season the island has had. One, there's no weight restrictions on the cruise ships, meaning you could come to St. Maarten, shop till you drop, go back. Two, a ticket from St. Maarten to Miami or vice versa is what, $1,500, $1,600. At times, I've seen tickets up to $5,000 one way from St. Maarten to Miami. If you think about cruises, it's $700, $500. Some ships, MSC right now, tickets for $300, $380. That's 7 days. That's eating basic food, drinking basic drinks. If you want to go premium, you pay extra. Nevertheless, $400. To get to St. Maarten, maybe $300, because Caribbean travel is expensive to an extent. But think about it. Under $1,000, you can get to St. Maarten, sleep in St. Maarten, take the ship from St. Maarten, eat on a ship for 7 days, shop till you drop, and go where you come from. There's no better ratio, in my opinion, when you look at value versus experience versus opportunity. And that also creates a new sub-niche, right? When we started home porting, most of the focus was getting the clients from Europe, getting them from the US, etc. But what about the collaborations moving ahead as well with the tourist office to further market St. Maarten as a destination within the Caribbean to take cruises? So, that is what I wanted to add on that point as well, based on your question, Ortega, in us looking further at inter-Caribbean travel.
Good afternoon. Clarence Connor, Director of the National Recovery Program Bureau. I'd like to make maybe one clarification, one comment, and then maybe the panel can address the comment that I'm going to make. The clarification is that the NRPB, I've heard it mentioned in in some of the presentations today and yesterday, is an institution that is charged with implementing the trust fund programs. The NRPB is an independent agency established by law, but NRPB does not function independently in the sense that everything that we do on behalf of government. So when we implement programs or when we execute programs within the portfolio, it is because the Council of Ministers, the government has approved that for us to be able to execute it. I just want to make that clear because it becomes like a household name, and it becomes like an independent, like we're out there doing our own thing, but we do it on behalf of the government and the people of St. Maarten. That is the clarification I want to make. But the suggestion that I would like to present here today, when you listen to the presentations of today and yesterday, you realize that there's a lot of information that we have compiled, and you just said it, Valia. We have a lot of documentation. We have a lot of stuff. What I would like to see is that stuff, that documentation, becoming something that we develop as an internal piece of work that we benefit from. And the point that I'm getting at is that in these type of sessions, which we've had and we will have more over the years, today is focusing on 2030. But what did the presentation, and I think if it also touched on that, what did the presentation of 2015 focus on? And what did the presentation of 2010 focus on? And what did the presentation of 2005 and going all the way back focus on? Because if we continuously have these discussions and just keep focusing on the next, decade, we will always be doing that. So my charge to the organizers, which I want to congratulate for bringing this symposium, this seminar together, I would want to hear that at the end of these 3 days or 3.5 days, that with the captive audience that we have in involvement of the people that are sitting here that have very important jobs and responsibilities, that we can decide from now that at the end of today's, tomorrow, or this week's session, that we're going to do 2 or 3 things in order for us to move forward to get to the next point. Because if we're thinking about 2030, it's going to come, and we're going to continue thinking. So let's resolve. Let's bring something at the end of the day to say, these are the 3 or 4 things that we will do from within the different perspective that will help us now focus on the next meeting, 6 months from now, a year from now, because it is the short term that determines how successful you're going to be in the midterm. That also determines, how you're going to achieve the goal in the long term.
Does any of the panelists want to jump in and answer Mr. Connor's statement or suggestion, rather?
I agree. I think also in my presentation, I did mention that some of the initiatives we're working on, specifically as it relates to country package measure E6, we do have timelines attached to them, and we will be working those specific ones out within the next 2 to 3 years, and some will come to fruition within the next 6 months, as early as 6 months.
What I would like to say on that is we cannot only rely on government. We ourselves as entrepreneurs, local business owners, we also have to get together and be able to assist government, enabling return on investment, again, like I said, where the tax compliance program, which is very, very important, not only for entrepreneurs, but for the community at large, to be able to understand compliance and the importance as an individual within the community. So again, to answer your question, Mr. Connor, that is something that I personally will take the initiative, and I will challenge Ms. Ann that we can sit together and put a program together that we can work on that will make our island compliant and raise our GDP to the highest possible that we can.
Good afternoon. My name is Shaul Richardson. Thank you to all the presenters and the people on the panel. What we heard from Mr. Wyatt was a need. Agriculture is a need. However, there are also opportunities. So instead of thinking about something difficult, there are some things that are at our disposal, and our geographical position puts us in a place where we can focus on more than just transshipment, as Mr. Gomes mentioned. My question is, how far would we be willing to go with implementing economic zoning, which would enable us to do warehousing close to the port, on the port, for distribution to other islands, but also on our island, which is, can also put us in a position that we can consolidate things that we produce here in St. Maarten to bring to that location for distribution, where we can maybe implement policies or sales strategies for American-approved medication, pharmaceuticals, which can be sold to tourists. Of course, you know, we can't do that to our own local population by the pharmacy, but insurance coverage from Americans, they cover certain medication which we do not sell here in St. Maarten. I can think of same thing on the port when you do the warehousing, that it is what becomes way more easier to do the provisioning of cruise vessels, whereas now the cruise vessels would fly in frozen goods, or they will ship a few containers at a time, you know. But to create incentive, you need to also be able to maneuver your legislation to a specific areas where you want certain things to happen. Two, very short, diversification is not only on the different of products, but also the location. What are we doing for diversification, economic diversification, also to bring economic activity to the neighborhoods and communities?
Okay. Anyone on the panel can jump in. And of course, you know, time flies when we're having good conversation. So we actually have 5 questions queued, but we only have time for 2 more. And I'm going to give those to people who have not asked a question yet. So it's going to be Ms. Ardane and, of course, Mr. Richards. So please answer the question, and then we will go ahead with the last 2 questions.
Okay, thank you. As we are pressed for time, Mr. Richardson, I know you're very much aware of the 3PL program from the past, third-party logistics, where I believe you was also part and parcel of looking at creative ways of streamlining goods, let's say sourced locally, packaged, and then delivered to the vessels. You definitely hit the nail on the head from a provisioning standpoint, where currently the port and 1 or 2 local entrepreneurs are actually looking at the opportunity of having a warehouse as well, but for fresh produce as well. That would service the vessels. One of the cruise lines, which name I won't mention here right now publicly. But besides being able to source produce and or dry goods here, also from a warehousing standpoint, for example, if you're on a cruise and you realize, oh, we're running out of towels or plates or forks or spoons, that those products can be readily available and sourced through St. Maarten. That in its own, and also, of course, being the manager of the port cargo section, the ease of doing business of getting containers to ships right next door puts us with a key selling point that many other destinations cannot offer at this point in time. However, I agree with you to an extent that we do need to look at some sort of free zone to alleviate and assist those businesses to compete better, which will anchor more vessels coming to St. Maarten. Meaning, again, yes, they come to St. Maarten because the country is safe, we have good tours, friendly people, I said, a whole 9 yards a while ago. But a key facet there is coming to the destination based on the ancillary services that we can offer. And one of those key items is being able to provision the vessel. So yes, I fully agree in that sense that we should pick back up. And as Mr. Connor said, you know, we have 1,000 plans and we keep making new plans, but you know, there is a plan on the table already. I believe it was done by KPMG back in the days in terms of a free zone, E-zone, and point plan. So I do agree in that sense.
Okay, briefly again, as it pertains to economic zones, if I'm not mistaken, St. Maarten already has legislation to support E-zones, but again, if it hasn't happened, it's because it's maybe a bit more complex than we care to admit. So it is not something it's not something for TIA to say, okay, we're going to move forward. It's something that takes discussion with other ministries, in particular the Ministry of Finance and possibly the Ministry of 𝒐𝒍𝒍𝒐𝒃, not sure. So that has to be discussed further. As it pertains to how do we bring business activity in the neighborhoods, I think, to reiterate, government's job is to bring visitors here. And I would actually say it's a combination. It's public-private sector collaboratively, they bring visitors here. Now, where the visitors go to, that's completely up to private sector. So if private sector, for example, using the example of ecotourism, Mr. Wyatt has a nice establishment in St. Peter's. If it is the intention for him to develop his business as a tour, then he has to put the necessary marketing, branding, etc. in that, which I know he does perfectly well. But again, it is for the private sector to take that initiative and do what they have to do to make sure that those visitors reach in the neighborhoods where they're offering whatever products or services they're offering.
Good morning. Oh, good afternoon, sorry. We spoke a lot about and heard a lot about diversification of our economy. And from the stats shown today, for our overnight tourists, timeshare owners still form a very large part of our tourists. My question is, have we considered to maintain the interests of the children and grandchildren of the initial timeshare owners on the island? Because we have seen over the years, especially after Hurricane Irma and Maria, who were our first visitors back to the island, those that consider St. Maarten home away from home. So, considering that most timeshare owners have purchased their timeshare 10, 20, even 30 years ago on St. Maarten, at this point in time, we have to keep the interests of their children who inherit the timeshare to continue to come. People that come to St. Maarten as home away from home, I'm looking at islandpreneur and the small businesses. That means those tourists have other needs and desires. I'm looking at telecommunication. The new generation are digital nomads. So are we considering this aspect to maintain ahead of our timeshare industry when we talk about this diversification?
Okay, it's for the entire panel, I'm guessing? Yes. Yes, okay. And we're going to go to our last question because we are now out of time. So we're going to go to our last question as you answer that.
I guess I'm the only one that can answer that. It's a loaded question. I see the answer in two ways, again, going back to public-private. From a public standpoint, yes, there's work to be done when it pertains to timeshare legislation. We know we've been working on it for some time. There was a draft that was passed by Parliament, and we've been back and forth trying to figure out how we can get this legislation passed. There are some technical issues that prevent us from passing the legislation at the moment that we're busy looking into, and I think that's enough that I'm going to say about that for the moment. And then from a private perspective, I think it is up to the individual timeshare developers, owners, properties to change their offering, adjust their offering to ensure that the children and grandchildren are still tied to timeshare, still interested in timeshare and what we have to offer on St. Maarten.
Can I add to it? I'll just add to the question briefly from a marketing destination perspective. I think we saw that the Tourism Bureau was busy with their entire rebranding strategy, etc. In terms of how do we sell St. Maarten, right? And it starts there, in my opinion, in terms of, you know, if you look at the airport, if you look at the port, if you look at SHTA, if you look at the resorts, we all have different messages in terms of how we sell St. Maarten. But the question is here now, what is St. Maarten as a vacation destination? How do we want to portray this island as a vacation destination? Because the manner in which the island appealed those first-time, let's say, timeshare owners 20, 30 years ago, that appeal has changed. What are the demographics that we are focusing on? If you look at right after, or during the pandemic rather, we had a total different demographic of tourists here that would normally go to Aruba and Cancun, etc. But these places was closed and St. Maarten was open. And we saw them, some of them was very wild, I must say. But, you know, I was at certain establishments and it was also spending money. So they wasn't buying a regular bottle of Hennessy or the regular bottle of Moet. They was going Magnums. So again, you know, from a destination standpoint, we do need to solidify this beautiful island, this 16 square miles, a friendly island. Do we call it a friendly island? Is it the party island? Is it the entertainment island? Is it the shopping island? We have it all, but what are we going to focus on collectively? That even if in the marketing messages of the port, I have that one thing in that marketing message that will be cohesively used with all of the other travel, let's say, institutions, and that one word, whatever we decide, but that one word, that one tag, that one quote.
Yeah. Sorry, my name is Franklin Richards. I would like to commend the government for this vision because I think it's a bold step going forward and those that have prepared it. So I think they really should get a big hand. But what I missed today is the SGs. I'm missing the SGs. I'm missing part of the government. I'm missing the Island Council members because Parliament members, because we talk about inclusion, and that is important to carry out this vision. Also important, this is a question that not only for the panel, is how do you intend to proceed, as Mr. Connor stated earlier? Is there implementation of the vision that you foresee will be in the budget, that you will foresee being in a multi-annual plan? Looking at the port, you should have investment plan. We can talk about it all of the time, but we really need to act now. We need to roll up our sleeves and get things done. We had before the carrying capacity study. It's still in the draw. We had the tourism master plan. That is still in the draw. And I would not like to see that this vision of government, the St. Maarten development plan, be put into the draw. Thanks.
So again, you know, time flies by when we're having fun, and the conversation has been interesting and fun. So we're going to wrap up now with a few words from Ms. Pearl Henderson. But also before we leave, I want to say you all have the document on a USB. So it's up to you to read through it. And indeed, hopefully, in a year or two, in 6 months, in a few months, we'll all get together and be able to discuss what you've read, your thoughts, your suggestions. Having said that, we're going to wrap up for the day. Once Ms. Henderson is done, we're done for the day, and we will be back tomorrow morning at 8:30 so that we can launch fully into our program for tomorrow. I want to thank everybody for coming, also all of those who presented and contributed, all of the questions. If you have questions still that you want to ask, that you did not get an opportunity to ask, please email them to Ms. Angelique Gums, and she will forward them to the necessary persons.
So just to make sure that my husband doesn't divorce me, it's Hendrickson. But what I wanted to say is I was privileged that BAC approached me and contracted me to assist in getting the last version and the last National Development Vision. And I think that a lot of things that was being discussed, we have to see that that's exactly what it is. If we start talking about, for instance, multi-annual budgets, that is the whole reason that when I was contracted, the transition was made from creating a plan, because there's no multi-annual budgets. So it became a vision. And it is St. Maarten's national development vision, because all the stakeholders in this room, if it was not them or somebody of their organization was involved in developing not only the pillars, but also developing the sub-themes, identifying goals. And of course, there's a very detailed outline implementation plan, even with stakeholders who can be involved. So seeing that that is on the USB stick, it is, in a sense, the next step for each and every one of us is to basically look at that national development vision and understand also that it is a vision and not a plan. So all of what you are doing now, if you want to make it your own, if you want to make it part of your organization, every decision that is made, every plan policy, it has to be plugged into that national development vision, that it can remain St. Maarten's national development vision. And that's what I just wanted to contribute, as thanking Angelique and Bob and government in general.
Thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow at 8:30. Have a great day. Oh, 1 second, Mr. Tobias has something to say.
Yes, we're all ready to leave, but I was just informed that, of course, with technology, there are some of you that may not be able to get the USB to open on your computer. If that's the case, just let them know. They have your email address, and they will email it for you, and it will also be placed on the website I was made to understand. So don't worry, you would get a hold of it. Thank you very much for coming out. Tomorrow we're going to discuss a safe, secured, decisive, and independent nature. So we look forward to seeing all of you bright and early tomorrow, 8:30, just like today. Thank you for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the day.